Hey guys, welcome back to the bumpy road to $10 million. If you're in your 20s or 30s and are thinking about how to grow your money in the stock market, this series is for you. As a reminder, this video is not financial advice. You should always do your own research before investing. Also, if you haven't seen the first 6 videos of this series, I highly encourage you to do so. Today's video will likely not make sense in isolation. And if you found these videos helpful so far, please hit like and subscribe below. So hopefully by now you have internalized that a key component of our strategy is to regularly invest $1,000 every 2 months after our initial investment date, no matter what. As Charlie Munger famously said, the first rule of compounding is to never interrupt it unnecessarily. And with a time horizon of over 20 years, this strategy is all about compounding. As you can see in the graph that we keep coming back to, the magic really happens on the back end. So today, we're going to jump to 2 months after our initial investment date. So the date is now February 28th, 2026, and we're going to see how we should allocate our additional $1,000 to this strategy. Frankly, it's not that complicated, but I still want to go over it for completeness. We will cover both scenarios discussed in video 4. Scenario 1 is where our initial capital invested is $1,000, and scenario 2 is where our initial capital invested is $10,000. Let's start with a quick recap of scenario 1 on the initial investment date. We had initial capital of $1,000 to invest. We bought 5 shares of UPRO and 2 shares of SPXL, and we had $145 in cash left over. Now, what we concluded is we should not buy put options because the portfolio value in scenario 1 is too small. But what should we do with the $145? We're not buying put options, and we don't have enough money to buy a share of SPXL. However, we can buy an extra UPRO share at $95, and this would be better than having $145 of cash lying around generating no return. And so in scenario 1 on the initial investment date, we would buy an extra share of UPRO, and ultimately we would have 6 shares of UPRO, 2 shares of SPXL, and $50 of cash left over. Now, let's fast forward 2 months to February 28, 2026. We will allocate an additional $1,000 in line with our strategy, and as we just saw, we also have $50 of cash left over from last time. So we'll have a total of $1,050 to invest. This would be split equally between UPRO and SPXL at $525 each. Also, if you remember from the previous video, the UPRO price had actually jumped by quite a bit since the first video of this series. This is normal and expected over time. So, consistent with this, as of February 2026, we'll assume the UPRO price is up to $105 and the SPXL price is $210. At these prices, on a rounded basis, we would be able to buy 5 shares of UPRO and 2 shares of SPXL. We would have invested $945, and so we'll have $105 of cash left over. Now, in this example, it just so happens that the UPRO price is exactly $105, so similar to the initial investment. Rather than having the cash lying around and earning no return, we would buy an extra UPRO share at $105 for a total of 6 UPRO shares. So ultimately, as of February 28, we would have a total of 12 shares of UPRO, 4 shares of SPXL, and no cash left over. Our portfolio will be worth $2,100. Remember that we have only invested $2,000 in the strategy at this point, and the extra 100 comes from the increase in UPRO and SPXL prices in the 2 months since the initial investment date. So we have been through a similar exercise in previous videos, and I said at the beginning, guys, this is not super complicated. it really is just a matter of checking what the UPRO and SPXL prices are every 2 months and calculating how many shares you can buy with your additional $1,000 at those prices. The higher the prices are, the less shares you can buy, and vice versa. Let's quickly go over scenario 2. What would we do on February 28th if we had invested around $10,000 on day 1 and already had put options in the portfolio? Well, the answer is almost exactly the same thing. So in scenario 2 on day 1, I won't go over how to derive this as this was previously covered, but at the bottom table here, we had invested $9,595 in UPRO and SPXL and $360 in put options for a total investment of $9,955. And so we would have around $50 in cash left over, which is pretty much the same as in scenario 1. Now let's go 2 months into the future to February 28th, and we have around $1,050 to invest. Remember, UPRO and SPXL prices are $105 and $210 respectively. So we would follow exactly the same allocation strategy as scenario 1 and end up buying 6 shares of UPRO. We would end up buying 2 shares of SPXL, and so our total number of shares would be 57 for UPRO and 27 for SPXL. The key difference from scenario 1 here is we would already have the put options in our portfolio, which cost us $360 on day 1. So let's talk about the put options quickly because they are important. If you have an excellent memory, you'll recall at the end of video 2, we walked through the math of how our portfolio would earn 2.7 times the S&P 500 return on average. As part of that, we assumed the put options would decline in value by 90% at the end of each year. And to refresh your memory, this is the page we walked through, and we made the assumption here. So the put options decline by 90% in 1 year. Let's simplify and assume this is a linear decline or a 7.5% decline per month. This means that the decline over 2 months is 15%. So in scenario 2, we assume our put options decline in value by 15% over 2 months from $360 to $306. On a portfolio level, this is quite immaterial though, and our $11,000 invested capital would have turned into almost $12,000. Now, a question you may be asking, in scenario 2, why are we not buying put options every 2 months like ETFs? The simple answer is it's just not practical or worth the brain damage. Because remember, firstly, the put options are quite expensive. Second, the put options are only there as insurance to protect our portfolio in an extreme downside scenario. In most years, we expect the puts to rapidly lose value and decline by almost 90% at the end of the year when they're close to expiration. So in our strategy, we will rebalance our portfolio and buy put options at the end of every year, not every 2 months. Another way to think about it, do we buy insurance on our car or home every 2 months? Of course not. It runs out at the end of the year and we renew it then. The same principle applies to our portfolio, although I admit the analogy is not perfect. So hopefully that was helpful, guys. We covered how to allocate capital in February under both scenario 1 and scenario 2, and this same allocation method would apply in April, in June, August, and October. In December, as we just alluded to, we would do things slightly differently as we rebalance our portfolio for the following year, and we will cover this in detail in a future video. Okay guys, so we've been quite mechanical over the past several videos, and unfortunately, it just needed to be this way, so that those without a finance background could understand exactly how we put our money to work. For the next video, however, I will put the mechanics to the side and take a few steps back. We'll talk a bit about my investing experience and how I came up with this strategy, which is something I would definitely want to know if I were you. We'll also talk a little bit about how the strategy has performed for me over the last 5 years. So hope these videos have been interesting and helpful so far. Please don't forget to like and subscribe below. As always, thank you for your time, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one.